Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for being here today.
No, you bet, Robert. Nice to see you again.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start the conversation around One Fiber initiative. So you guys have a lot of history in deploying fiber networks. What are you doing different with One Fiber? Can you give us a little more context on what that's about?
It's a great question, because One Fiber is unique in the way we've done it, in that it's not purpose-built for a specific area of the network. In the past, FiOS had its own build, if you will. IOF, or between our offices, was an independent build. Long-haul fiber, again, independent build. One Fiber says, nope, we're going to put in a larger cable count, and we're going to use it for all service types.
So whether that's enterprise or residential or business,
or
back
wireless,
whatever
or internal,
yeah,
you know, it's really a significant change for us, because a lot of circuits are, of course, internal circuits, infrastructure circuits. That also rides on One Fiber. We're going to leverage that one asset for all capacity.
And so what's driving the change? I mean, obviously you guys are doing a lot with 4G, 5G. Wireless is a big part of Verizon's strategy. Is that what driving, or is it really a combination of multiple things?
It's a combination of multiple things. I would say that was the impotence. That's what really got us to thinking about this. You know, do we go build another overlay network, if you will, for wireless, for 5G and 4G expansion and small cells and Internet of Things and smart cities? How do we attack that? And we looked at our existing fiber plant and say, well, we have to augment it. And I think every carrier will find that the fiber in the ground is not sufficient to support the kind of devices we're talking about, because it's no longer, you know, large macro cell towers or even small cells to some extent. It's truly, how do you light up every street? You know?
And you don't even know where these devices are going to be. I mean, in the future. I mean, projecting out, like, nobody can tell you there's going to be 5G devices at this point and this point and this point. So they're going to be all over the place, and how do you forecast for that? And it ends up being, you know, if I don't start converging everything onto a single network, then, you know, it's going to be a difficult task, right?
And they're in unusual places. You know, that's the idea. You know, before, even our FiOS build had a house address. You knew where it was before you even started. You know, in a tall, shiny building, you know where it is before you even start. Now, there might be new augments or things that get built over time, but you can care for that as an add-on. Here you're going, well, it could be a light pole, it could be the side of a building, it could be the top of a building, it could be just about anywhere. And if I'm going down that street anyway, and I serve businesses along that street, why wouldn't I pick them up at the same time? But again, we have to be able to share that infrastructure, and that's something that we haven't been able to do. And it gets more than the physical topology, because it's also the inventory systems and provisioning systems. Everything has to care for the fact that that's not purpose-built fiber anymore. I want to serve a 5G antenna, a 4G site that might already exist, a CRAN hub location, a new shiny building or tall shiny building, down to a Pizza Hut, you know, mom and pop. And if there's a residential guy along the way,
great, all in one network.
All in one network and one fiber.
I think Verizon's probably further along than just about anybody in terms of their, you know, being aggressive with their fiber deployments and kind of building ahead for this future 5G world. But I think everybody's now starting to come around to that same type of issue.
I think they will. If they look at, you know, we did Boston first. That's where we announced One Fiber. We went into downtown Boston and said, oh, we're the incumbent supplier here. Surely we have fiber. And you got to look, and yes, we've got fiber, but it's, you know, it's a 100-strand count or 144 count, or, you know, it's relatively small. It's not 864s or 1728s. It's, you want to throw a lot of fiber at the problem. Now, at the same token, we're trying to be effective with that fiber and use multi-purpose. You know, as you guys know very well, we would like to put as much services on every fiber as possible. We just want to have enough that we can actually sell it to other folks, not just care for our own business.
So multi-purpose being like point-to-multipoint type ODNs or optical distribution networks, that's a big part of your future strategy?
That's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it.
Now, fiber conservation, right? Getting more mileage out of that fiber.
Yeah, exactly. And out of the equipment that goes onto it as well, because, you know, keep in mind that every one of those fibers, if you have independent fibers, they've got equipment at both ends. And we'd like to consolidate that as well. You know, if we can get 16, 32, 64 users on a given piece of equipment, we've also reduced the amount of electronics we've got inside the central office. And that goes a long ways also.
Yeah, because even if you did converge everything onto a single fiber network, if all of those were home run point-to-point circuits back to a wiring center, that would still, from a scale perspective, and just the amount of equipment and amount of fiber, it doesn't scale very well, especially in an uncertain future with how many devices are actually going to need fiber out there.
Right. Keep in mind that we use a centralized split with bypass fibers so that they're available for that corner case that won't go on it. SIPRI,
lots of,
right?
lots of bandwidth and needs it to be dedicated all the time. Can't easily be shared.
Easily be shared or is special, like SIPRI is today.
Very low latency.
Yeah, very, very different.
Yeah.
And therefore we bypass it and we're able to achieve it on that same fiber cable, which shared, but it may have different electronics on each end. Everything else, anything that we can, of course, we would put over the shared infrastructure. We're very big proponents of NG-PON too. We're pushing it out as aggressively as possible, as you know, because that sharing of both fiber and electronics is very critical. Most circuits aren't that high bandwidth.
Yeah.
You know, most things that you sell to end users is still measured in megabits, not gigabits, and we want to make sure that we can consolidate that as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing you mentioned NG-PON too, because obviously, if I look at GPON and XGS-PON or 10 gig EPON, these different flavors, I mean, the whole point of, or the primary benefit of NG-PON 2 is really converging a broad range of services onto a common network, and which is obviously very synergistic with what your whole goals are with one fiber. So it's a logical technology choice, and I think we're seeing, again, a lot of the same discussions now globally of, seeing that benefit with NG-PON 2. If I'm going to converge services onto a common fiber infrastructure, and I look at a point-to-multipoint fiber infrastructure in particular, then NG-PON 2 is a very logical match, and from an access technology perspective.
Yep, agreed. And it came along at the right time also. Timing has a lot to do with these things too. You always want to take advantage of the most recent advances that you can when you start your build, because it has to last a long time once you put it in the ground.
Multi-decade type deployment models, and that's what NG-PON 2 is trying to address.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And granted, we've got a lot of GPON out there, and we've seen it as an evolutionary stage also, where we could run it over the top of that existing plant where we wanted to, in places like Boston where it already exists. Now, it didn't in downtown, but if you go out to first neighborhood outside of there, it's regular PON, GPON, and here we can do an overlay.
So it sounds like one fiber is kind of starting in areas maybe where you haven't fully built out with fiber. You're starting there, but then where are you in that timeline? And then also, I guess the second part of that question is, you have a lot of homes passed today with FiOS today. I mean, how does that fit into your initiative in terms of one fiber and NG-PON 2 and some of these different technologies?
Again, now when we go do these overbuilds, as an example, what we do is pull that existing fiber plant, and we pull it from all areas. There's been lots of acquisitions as well that fit into this. So what we're doing is having one common inventory system. That's where it kind of starts at. First of all, you got to work on your management structure, if you will, or how the company's organized, and say, guess what? We're all going to we're going to share this asset. It's expensive, lasts a lifetime. We're going to share this asset when we put it into the ground or on the poles, and then you got to have one common inventory system. So for us, whether it was previous leases by our wireless business unit or our enterprise business unit or our telecom, or if it was FiOS, it all goes into the same inventory system when it gets augmented. So if we lay a new cable in, we pull all the existing stuff. XO, great example. We just finished the acquisition last year. They had a lot of metro fiber. We're pulling that in the same inventory system and saying, okay, now it's one fiber.
Okay, it's going to be part of one fiber.
It's part of one fiber. Any service that we want to sell must be supported over that entity, over that asset. And if we can share it, of course, with electronics, then all the better.
No, it's a tremendous amount of efficiency, right? So it is taking a lot of these services that used to be on SONET, moving them into kind of one fiber, moving the traditional enterprise, small business, residential, everything kind of comes together on this one fiber, usually one network initiative.
Right. They go together because, again, that one network initiative includes the PON, as well as the transport and also the routing platforms that sit on top of there. It's, again, saying that all service types need to be supported on that fiber infrastructure and on that transport infrastructure, on that PON infrastructure. Once it's put in place, we're not going to duplicate it. We're not going to create multiples in order to support different business units or different service. And it's exciting times though, because we're building new infrastructure to support legacy services as well as new services. And the new services are 5G antennas going up all over the place. Understand that today it's you do whatever you have to do in order to make the trials work. We have 11 trials going on today. We've announced plans for next year to launch, and it's pre-production equipment in many cases. So you gotta do what you need to do in order to turn things up. But we're headed towards a path where we believe that we can get 5G antennas put onto the top of that NG-PON2 as well. There's lots of work in the standards that have to be done, where we keep arguing about this option 2 split and where the protocol, how much processing gets done at the radio versus at the hub site, but we're pushing really hard.
Yeah, high split versus low split, and kind of front haul, mid haul, back haul type architectures. But yeah, I mean, there's a big push out there to obviously to make the business case align with the technology, right? So how do you get cost-effective front haul connectivity to all these devices in the network so that you can scale them up, basically?
Cost-effective and also where you want it. Like I said, because it comes into non-conventional locations where
every other street light, kind of light poles.
Yeah, and the smart cities are the same way. It's built on a lot of the same diverse locations where you're going to have to install infrastructure, and unless you've got a cost-effective way to do it, there's just no way it's going to be supported by the metropolitan areas. Our goal is to get it to a point where it can scale, and you can do it cost-effectively, and then also maintain it. This is part of that same inventory system, and rearranging or organizing your operations folks and your NOC and your provisioning folks. Everybody has to be in alignment here in order to make that work, because you can't just carve out a portion of the network and say, that's mine, I can go do what I want to on it. It's a shared infrastructure, and we got to make sure that everybody has access.
Yeah, it's probably a great match also. We didn't talk about it a lot, but like SDN-based programmability, so that now you have this network that's shared by a lot of different entities, and now you need to effectively multi-tenant it out and allow a lot of different groups to then share those same resources, move services quickly and all that. So you mentioned the inventory systems, but all the provisioning systems and everything else are really going to make sure they're modernized to kind of adapt to that new world.
There's tons of things that go behind that intelligence that is now becoming available. The whole software-defined networking is adding a lot of intelligence into that network so that you can know when you're going to do maintenance, which customers are going to be affected, or how am I going to move things around in the event of an outage or storms that come in.
In a case like NG-PON2, redundant equipment, you can move wavelengths on the different equipment to do type of in-service updates and things of that nature.
Correct. To do in-service upgrades, but because maintenance activity is actually more impactful to most customers than outages. Folks know that there's always going to be an outage when you've got a fiber to connect something up. It's inevitable that someday it's going to get cut. Everybody kind of understands that. It doesn't happen very often. Maintenance, on the other hand, if you're going to continue to upgrade your network, happens quite a bit, and we want to make that seamless to the customer base.
Okay. Yeah. No, great. Thanks, Glenn. I really appreciate the time today.
You bet, Robert. It's great talking to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely.